Most people think toxic people enter their lives because they are unlucky, naive, or too trusting. But what if that belief itself is the trap? What if the real reason has nothing to do with bad judgment and everything to do with something you do automatically, quietly, without even realizing it? Here's the uncomfortable truth. Toxic people don't search for weak individuals. They search for predictable emotional patterns. And if you've noticed a repeating cycle, being misunderstood, drained, taken for granted, or emotionally exhausted, it's not coincidence. It's recognition. There is a specific psychological signal that some people broadcast without words, a signal that says, I will tolerate more than I should. I will explain instead of enforce. I will stay calm while you cross the line. To healthy people, this signal feels safe. To toxic people, it feels inviting. What makes this mistake so dangerous is that it looks like virtue. It hides behind kindness, patience, empathy, and understanding. It feels morally superior. It even feels mature. But in the wrong psychological environment, these traits don't protect you, they expose you. The most disturbing part is this. The moment you correct this one invisible behavior, certain people don't argue, don't confront you, and don't try to fix things. They simply disappear. Not because you became cold or unkind, but because the access they depended on quietly closed. If you've ever wondered why some people drain you while others respect you effortlessly, why the same boundaries work with some and fail with others, or why being good never seems to be enough, what you're about to hear will change how you see every relationship you have. Because the mistake that attracts toxic people is not what you think, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. Toxic people do not move through the world randomly attaching themselves to whoever is nearby. Psychologically, their behavior is guided by pattern recognition, not chance. They are often highly sensitive to emotional cues because they rely on relational dynamics to regulate their own instability. Consciously or unconsciously, they scan for people whose nervous systems signal tolerance, self-doubt, or an overdeveloped sense of responsibility for others' emotions. This does not mean they seek weakness. In fact, they are often drawn to emotionally strong individuals who can absorb chaos without immediately pushing back. What attracts them is predictability. If someone consistently responds to discomfort by explaining, appeasing, or over-functioning, that pattern becomes visible very quickly. Toxic individuals test boundaries early, through subtle disrespect, emotional withdrawal, guilt-inducing comments, or small violations. When those tests are met with patience instead of consequences, the dynamic is confirmed. The relationship feels safe to them because it allows control without accountability. This is why the same person can be respected in one environment and exploited in another. It is not about personality, it is about emotional responses. Toxic people stay where their behavior is tolerated, emotionally processed for them, or indirectly rewarded. When those patterns are absent, when boundaries are calm, firm, and consistent, they rarely attach at all. One of the most common psychological errors that draws toxic people closer is the quiet confusion between kindness and emotional availability. Kindness is a value. Emotional availability, when unregulated, becomes a resource others can consume. Many people believe that being good means being endlessly patient, always understanding, and emotionally accessible at all times. But from a psychological perspective, this blurs a critical boundary. When kindness is paired with unlimited access, it stops being a choice and starts becoming an expectation. Toxic individuals are particularly sensitive to this dynamic because they seek external regulation. When they encounter someone who listens without limits, forgives without repair, and stays present even after repeated violations, they learn that emotional labor will be provided regardless of their behavior. This is not interpreted as generosity, it is interpreted as permission. Over time, the relationship shifts into imbalance, where one person gives stability and the other consumes it. Healthy relationships involve reciprocity and self-protection. Emotional availability should expand and contract based on trust and respect. When it does not, kindness unintentionally communicates that boundaries are flexible and that discomfort will be tolerated silently. This is the moment kindness stops protecting you and starts attracting those who benefit from its misuse. Long before you set a boundary with words, your nervous system has already communicated it through behavior. The way your body responds to discomfort, through anxiety, appeasement, silence, or over-explaining, quietly teaches others what is acceptable. From a psychological standpoint, human behavior is shaped less by what is said and more by what is reinforced. If disrespect is followed by emotional engagement, reassurance, or self-blame, the nervous system on the other side registers that the behavior did not create loss. It created access. Toxic individuals are especially responsive to these signals because they operate through emotional conditioning. When they push a limit and observe heightened anxiety instead of firmness, guilt instead of clarity, or emotional labor instead of distance, they learn that pressure works. Your regulated calm in moments of violation can either signal strength or availability depending on whether it is paired with consequence. Without consequence, calm becomes permission. Over time, the nervous system adapts. You may begin anticipating conflict, managing emotions before they escalate, or minimizing your own reactions to maintain peace. This self-regulation, while adaptive in unsafe environments, becomes costly in relationships that require mutual respect. Others do not follow your intentions, they follow the emotional outcomes your nervous system consistently produces. Over-explaining, over-giving, and over-tolerating are often mistaken for emotional intelligence, but psychologically they tend to produce the opposite effect of what is intended. When you repeatedly explain your feelings, justify your boundaries, or give more than what is reciprocated, you shift the relational balance. Instead of mutual respect, the dynamic becomes instructional. You are teaching others how much effort is required to keep access to you, and when the cost is low, the value is unconsciously reduced. From a behavioral perspective, explanations offered after mistreatment can function as self-erasure. They signal that your needs are negotiable and that discomfort will be managed internally rather than addressed externally. Overgiving creates a similar distortion. When support, forgiveness, or availability are offered without repair or accountability, it removes the natural friction that corrects behavior. The relationship no longer requires adjustment from the other person. Over-tolerance is the most subtle and damaging pattern. Each time a violation is absorbed instead of addressed, the nervous system normalizes it. This not only trains others to escalate, but trains you to adapt downward. What begins as generosity slowly becomes depletion. Respect does not grow in environment. NTS where limits are endlessly softened. It grows where boundaries are clear, consistent, and protected. The psychological shift that causes toxic people to lose interest is not confrontation, punishment, or emotional withdrawal. It is far quieter and far more unsettling to them. It occurs when your internal regulation changes. When you stop reacting with guilt, anxiety, or urgency, and instead respond with calm limits and emotional neutrality, the entire dynamic collapses. Toxic individuals depend on emotional feedback to maintain control. They require intensity, explanation, or emotional labor to feel engaged. When that stimulation disappears, so does their motivation. This shift happens when you no longer seek to be understood at the cost of self-respect. You stop clarifying your intentions and start observing behavior. You allow discomfort to exist without rushing to fix it. Boundaries become simple, not dramatic. You say less, not more. From a psychological perspective, this removes the reward loop. There is no payoff for pushing, testing, or provoking. What replaces reactivity is grounded presence. You remain polite, but unavailable to manipulation. You remain kind, but not accessible without reciprocity. To healthy people, this feels stable and secure. To toxic people, it feels empty and unworkable. They disengage not because you change them, but because the pattern no longer feeds them. The truth is, toxic people are not removed from your life by force. They leave when the environment no longer supports who they are. The moment you stop confusing endurance with love, explanation with connection, and tolerance with maturity, the pattern breaks. Not because you became colder, but because you became clearer. You were never meant to carry emotional weight for those who refuse to carry their own. Your calm is not an obligation. Your empathy is not an open due. When boundaries become a natural extension of self-respect rather than a reaction to pain, only those capable of mutual responsibility remain. This shift is not loud. It does not require confrontation or drama. It requires alignment, and alignment is deeply uncomfortable for people who thrive on imbalance. When you no longer participate in dynamics that drain you, you stop being familiar to those who depend on that drain. What you allow shapes what stays. What you protect defines who has access. And once your inner world becomes non-negotiable, toxic people do not argue, adjust, or evolve around you. They simply disappear.